Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for ellenhudson.com. Thanks for joining me today. Now, sticky mats are all the rage in paper crafting and card making right now. And today I'm going to give you a close-up look at both the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat as well as the Misty sticky mat. And I'm going to share 5 ways, maybe even more than that you can use these to make your paper crafting and card making easier. Now, I'm also going to walk you through 3 card projects that kind of show you how I incorporate this into my daily crafting. Now, the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat, you saw that first. It is white and has black grid lines. The Misty sticky mat comes in a pack of 3, and it includes a 1/2 inch grid, a 1/8 inch grid, as well as a 1/4 inch grid, and I'm showing you each of these. Now, my 1/4 inch grid, I actually took this mat and I've cut it into smaller pieces. And that piece there in the bottom left-hand corner, that actually is the same size as an A2 size card front. And I'm going to show you how I use that to position die cuts on my card fronts and to make sure that they're even. But I did want to say this comes as one piece, but you can trim it down. And that's kind of one way to make it more useful in your craft room. Now, the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat, it is white. It has a low tack adhesive on it, but you can see it's plenty strong to adhere to my hand and keep my paper in place as I'm working. And that's kind of the point of these sticky mats. Now, all of the sticky mats are going to come with like an acetate cover sheet. You're going to want to save those and replace them after each use to keep dust and extra debris off of your sticky mat, which will keep it from being as sticky. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is that both the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat as well as the Misty sticky mat are designed to fit in your standard size Misty. So that's going to come in very handy when you're doing your stamping and positioning things on a card layout, or if you want to do edge to edge stamping. So I'm just kind of showing you both of these inside of the standard size Misty here. And you can use either of these with or without the mouse pad or black foam that comes inside of your Misty. So you can use them in conjunction with both cling mount rubber stamps as well as clear stamps. Now, one of the biggest differences between the two is that the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat is white and it is not see-through, and the Misty sticky mat is see-through. And keep in mind, the Misty sticky mat does come in a pack of 3 as well. Now, before we get into the cards, I just thought I would show you a few ways that these may come in handy before I actually get into the card making. Now, the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat has this nice little kind of card outline. It's an A2 size outline that goes both vertical and horizontal right in the middle of the sticky mat. And I have found that the adhesive on the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat is a little less tacky than the Misty sticky mat, but it is plenty of tack to hold your project in place. Now, why would you want to hold this in place in the middle of your Misty? And that's a good question. I'm going to show you right here. I'm going to take out the foam out of my Misty stamping tool because I'm going to use a cling mount rubber stamp. And I want to do some off the edge stamping onto my A2 size card front here. Now, a lot of times, if you just place your paper in your Misty stamping tool, it has the potential to move around. And if you want to double stamp an image, that could be a problem. So having a sticky mat inside of your Misty while you're stamping will hold that paper in place and allow you to stamp and then re-stamp an image if you need to. And you can be assured that both your stamp and your cardstock are going to stay in the exact same spot. And I don't have to use a magnet to hold my paper there, so I have nothing getting in the way of my stamping, and I can then stamp this off the edge of this card front and have one continuous pattern along the entire surface of my A2 size card front. Now, I know some of you are absolutely freaking out because I just got ink on my stick and stamp mat, but that's okay. I'm going to take my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois here. I just have it damp with some water, and I'm going to gently wipe away the ink that was left behind by my stamp. Now, Brutus Monroe does also sell a matte mist that you can use to clean your mat, or you can run these underneath a little bit of water and allow them to dry, and then that stick kind of comes back. Now, the Misty Sticky Mat works in much the same way, but it is transparent, so you can see through it, and that can come in handy in a few situations. But I do find that the adhesive on the Misty Sticky Mat is a little bit stickier. So I'm going to actually use my Misty Sticky Mat here to show you another way that you can incorporate this into your crafting, not necessarily in your Misty stamping tool, to make things a little easier. And that's by using your sticky mat to hold stencils in place. So I have an A2 size card front on my Misty Sticky Mat here, and I just have that black piece of cardstock beneath it so that you can see the grid on the Misty Sticky Mat a little bit easier. And I am using that sticky mat to hold this Pink Fresh Studio stencil in place while I stencil over my cardstock. And that is going to hold it in place securely, and I don't have to kind of keep my hand on it or use additional adhesive to hold my stencil down. Now, one thing I want to mention is if you take your cardstock and you peel it off of either of these sticky mats by bending the cardstock, you may end up with a little bit of warping on your cardstock. Instead, I recommend bending the sticky mat away from the cardstock. So you're going to kind of roll the sticky mat off of the cardstock while keeping the cardstock straight. And that's going to reduce the amount of warping or bending that you may experience when you pull your cardstock off of a sticky mat like this. Now, I also have one of my Misty Sticky Mats cut down to the size of an A2 size card front. I just took one of those and trimmed it with my trimmer so that it was the exact same size as an A2 size card front. And then I marked the center with an X. And what I do with this little piece is I kind of use it like people use press and seal. However, by having the Misty Sticky Mat, this is reusable, so I can reuse it multiple times. And I will use this to help me center things up on the front of my card or hold die cuts in place while I place adhesive on the back, and then I can just position them exactly where I want them onto my card front. Now, I used a little liquid glue on the back of this die cut here. I gave it a little time to kind of set up, and then I gently pulled the mat away from the cardstock, and I have a perfectly centered die cut. Now, the other thing that these sticky mats can be great for is holding die cuts in place while you put adhesive on the back, or kind of experimenting with positioning on your card front. So you can kind of get your hands out of the way and see exactly where you want them. I have foam adhesive on the back of this die cut here. And once I know where I want to position it, I just pressed the foam adhesive in place onto the cardstock and pulled the sticky mat away from that die cut. So now that we've explored several ways to use these sticky mats, let's put it into action and make a few cards. And I just gave you a little peek at the color palette that I'll be using today, all Catherine Pooler inks in Flirty Fuchsia, Pucker Up, Hot Tub, and Wintergreen. I love this combination. And I am going to start by designing my card project right on the sticky mat. So this rectangle is actually a little bit smaller than an A2 size card front, and I'm positioning it in the center of that A2 size frame on the Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat. And I have my own DIY stencil. I was inspired by my friend Carly T, who creates some fabulous products, to create my own circle stencil out of some acetate that I purchased from the Essentials by Ellen line. I love their clear window plastic. It is one of my favorites. And I've just used a basic circle die to die cut that from the center of this 6x6 piece of acetate. And I positioned that over my card front directly on the sticky mat. Then I placed my sticky mat into my Misty stamping tool and I positioned my stamp exactly where I want it. So I have my stencil held in place. My stamp is exactly where I need it in my Misty stamping tool. And then I'm going to take this and just do a little bit of ink blending right over that stencil. Now I'm going to wipe away the excess ink from my stencil and remove it from my sticky mat, but I'm going to leave my cardstock in place because now I can just slip this right back into my Misty stamping tool. I know exactly where my Mondo Wildflower stamp is going to land on this layout because I positioned that ahead of time. I'm going to ink it up with some VersaFine Clear Nocturne pigment ink, and I'm going to stamp it right over that stenciled area. So I had a great idea of where all of this was going to land. I was able to use the grid to help me position things on this card front. And I knew that my stencil was where I wanted. It was going to stay in place. I knew my stamp was going to align well with my stenciled area because I planned that ahead of time. And then I was able to just move my cardstock, kind of twist it and turn it around on that sticky mat as I was doing my stenciling as well. And I'm just going to clean up the extra ink by gently wiping it away using my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois, and I will clean my stamp with that as well. Now, I thought this would make a beautiful kind of one-layer card. I mean, if you know me, I rarely do a one-layer card. So I thought I would just foil a sentiment right over this design. So I am using one of the sentiments from the Splatter Sentiments Hot Foil Plate Set from Spellbinders, and I'm holding it in place with a little bit of repositionable adhesive there on the front. I used the Glimmer Champagne Foil and ran that through my die cutting machine after heating it on my foil press. If you want some more tips on foiling, be sure to check out the other videos here. And then I have that beautifully foiled sentiment on my card front. Now I'm also going to use another foil plate to press a design into my card base here. This time I'm not using any foil or any heat. I'm just using the cardstock and this foil plate along with the platform of my foil press. And I ran my card base through my Gemini Junior and it pressed that design into my card base. It's kind of like a dry debossing effect. And then I am going to position a piece of white cardstock inside of the card to write on. And I positioned my card front on the front of this card using some foam adhesive. Now for this next card project, I am going to create some colored strips by doing a direct to paper technique with those same ink colors that I used earlier. So I have a piece of scrap paper here as well as my Tonic Easy Clean Craft Mat, and I am just pressing the ink pad directly on these strips. These are from the Color Me strips from the Essentials by Ellen line, and it is the larger strips, the Color Me strips. And I have my card front positioned onto my Misty sticky mat. Now I placed this into my Misty stamping tool, and you don't actually have to do this, but you're going to see me use that sticky mat to hold things in place and kind of plan my layout for this card. So I have 4 different strips here, and I'm just positioning them on my card front. I can kind of pick them up and move them around, reposition them as I need to. And I don't have any adhesive on the back of these strips yet because I'm still planning my layout. But what this sticky mat is going to allow me to do is to hold things in place, figure out where I want everything, and then add some adhesive to the back and position them permanently. Now you're going to see me position these strips here, and then I decided it would be fun to have a different die cut, creating some additional texture behind it. So I took the Mod Floral die from the Essentials by Ellen line, and I die cut it from some white cardstock, and I'm just sliding it under those strips that I've already held in place with the sticky mat. Remember, they're not permanently adhered yet, so I can do a lot of planning for this layout just by holding those in place. Now, the other thing I really like about both of these sticky mats is that there is a grid on both of them. The grids are a little bit different, but those grid lines really help to kind of line things up, position things on your card, make sure you get things straight. And while I'm not actually using that in this purpose right now, I can kind of hold my card front straight on this mat and make sure I'm kind of working on something that's squared up, which I really like. Now you saw me slide that die cut underneath there and position it with a little bit of liquid glue just by kind of sneaking my little glue bottle behind there. Now I'm going to remove these strips from that sticky mat one by one and position them back on the card, and this is going to adhere them permanently onto my card. And once they're adhered on the card front, I can go ahead and bend that sticky mat away from my card project, remove my card front, trim off the excess, and I'm just gonna gently wipe away the little bit of glue that I might have gotten. I love that both of these sticky mats are kind of, you know, in a great price range. They're a tool that you can use over and over again in various ways in your crafting space. And I don't have to be worried that I'm going to ruin it. If I get a little bit of ink on it, I just wipe it away or rinse it with some water in the sink, and then the stick is kind of restored. Now, eventually you may have to replace them, and that's okay. But I find that there's so many ways to use them in my craft room. They really are handy. And you just saw me use the sticky mat again to hold my die cut in place or keep my fingers out of the way while I did a little ink blending along the bottom of the die cut as well. Now this hay is from the Mondo Hello die set from the Essentials by Ellen line. I have 3 plain white die cuts stacked up beneath that ink blended die cut on the top to give this a little dimension, and I added a couple more of the plain white floral die cuts from that Mod floral die set, and I positioned those using some foam adhesive right over that striped area. Now I'm taking a little zig 2-way glue pen and just swiping it along the bottom of that die cut. I allowed that to dry, and then I used the Glimmer champagne foil to just add a little bit of foiling to the bottom of that die cut to tie in the gold that was in the previous card as well. Now for my final card project, I'm going to use both the Brutus Monroe Stick and Stamp mat along with my Misty sticky mat to help me not only mask off an area with the stencil that I used on my first card, but also to position my die cuts perfectly on my card layout here. So I'm starting out with that stencil that I created earlier, and I have my card front on my Brutus Monroe Stick and Stamp mat. I'm using this background stamp from My Favorite Things. I'm inking it up with some hot tub ink from Catherine Pooler and stamping it onto my card front. Now that mask is in place, so I'm only going to have a circle area of the stamping on my card front. And you can see I didn't get a great stamped image the first time, so I was able to re-stamp my image in the exact same spot, and I don't have any problem with that because my cardstock was held in place by that sticky mat. Now I'm taking the mini rainbow die set from the Essentials by Ellen line, and I die cut it from some white cardstock, and I'm going to use that direct to paper technique once again to add color to each of these white die cuts, starting with the largest one, and I'm inking that in Flirty Fuchsia. Then I will move to Pucker Up, Hot Tub, and then Winter Green. Now these are smaller die cuts, and when you're working with them individually, they can be a little bit fussy to position and to kind of keep in line and keep in order and keep them spaced out. So I like to use the Misty mat that I cut down into an A2 size card front to pick these all up once I have them positioned on my card layout where I want them. And I am just going to take this and put the sticky side down right over the top of that card front. That's going to pick up all those die cuts that are on top. And then I can add some foam adhesive to these while they are still on this A2 size sticky mat. And then I'm going to lay this right back over the top of my card front again. And that foam adhesive will hold these die cuts in place, and I can just peel away the Misty sticky mat. And by leaving my project on the Brutus Monroe Stick and Stamp mat, I was just able to keep my hands out of the way and give myself kind of a handle on this card front. Now, another great way to use these sticky mats is to hold small pieces of cardstock in place while you stamp, say, sentiments on them. You can use the grid lines on your Misty to line up small sentiment stamps, and you can use the grid lines on the Misty mat or the sticky mats to keep those sentiment strips straight as you stamp on them. So I just wanted to show you this. I actually don't use the sentiment strip in my finished card project, but it is another great way to use either of these sticky mats to make your card making process a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and finish up card number 3. I die cut a heart using the High Five die set from the Essentials by Ellen line. And I die cut that from some Basil Pale Rose, and I'm just adhering that to the right lower edge of my rainbow. And then I'm finishing it off with this Birthday Vibes hot foil greeting from the Casual Greetings hot foil stamp. Now I finished all of these card projects off with some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh to add a little more shine and glam. If you know me, that is just my jam. I can't help it. And there you have it, 3 finished card projects showing the different ways that I like to incorporate a sticky mat into my paper crafting and card making process. I think that there are so many ways that you can find to use these sticky mats in your craft room, and they're a great inexpensive tool that you can use over and over again. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can check there, or you can head on over to the coordinating blog post that will be in the YouTube description as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, I am so grateful that you stopped by and hung out with me today. I hope you were inspired and I hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on this YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared here. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.